Good morning, church. Good to be with you guys. Thank you so much for coming and joining us in worship. Thank you also to those of you who are watching Facebook Live. Let's just give them a round of applause real quick. Can we do that? We just want to say thank you. In whatever space you happen to be, taking this kind of content and information, and we're glad that you have joined us in worship. Let's do this ever so quickly. Would you stand right where you are? Would you turn to somebody, give them a high five, and say good morning? I'm glad you're here. So we are talking about thinking orange, and this idea of like Catherine said, it's the light of the world, yellow combined with the love of God, the love of the family, the heart of the family. And so yellow and red makes orange. And so today we're kind of going to dig a little deeper into this notion of family. And you say the word family, and I don't know what your family life was like. And so for some people, that's good memories, and that's good stuff. And then for others of us in the room, if we're just honest, it's probably not so good, and there's some hard situations in our life. And so, it kind of comes with a mixed bag, doesn't it? And so the word family, it can be great, it can be heartwarming, it can be lovely, it can be sort of that old Norman Rockwell, idea, or it can be very tragic and disruptive. And so, it just comes with a lot of stuff. But if you're not careful, what we'll do is we'll pause in this space and we'll say, well, this really doesn't have anything to do with me because I don't have kids, I don't have any of this up here. And so, or I'm a college student, or I'm a divorcee, or I'm single, or I'm an empty nester, or I'm a senior adult, or wherever you happen to find yourself along the spectrum of life, you come to a moment like this in a series like this, and it's easy if you're not careful to check out. And I just simply want to say, don't check out. Don't check out because, the reality is regardless of where you find yourself in the process, this series applies to you. And the reason that it applies to you is much like what Catherine said, is you're a part of the church. And so because you are a part of this faith family, this connects to you. And so, it again, regardless of who you are, every time that we have ever done a baptism, whether it's been here on the stage or it happens right over there where a baptismal font typically is, and I hold infants and children in my arms, or are there adults standing there, one of the things that we do in the middle of the room as the family gathers around, and you have to turn around and it feels real awkward, but I kind of like the awkwardness of that space, is just simply because of this. We get in this moment and we want everybody to realize you have a part to play, because I stand there and I say these words. I say, Brothers and sisters of the household of God, I commend these people to your love and your care. Will you do all in your power to confirm their faith, to mature them in love, and to perfect them in hope? And then you say what? We will. And just so that you know, so that we all can kind of get on the same page with the vows, if the statement begins with, will you, the answer is, I will, or we will, right? And if it's do you, it's I do, or we do, right? Exactly. Okay, so now we all know. But you say those things. And so you say those vows, and you're not just repeating words. In other words, what you're really saying is, hey, we're going to walk with you through the journey of life. We're going to step into this space where we're all going to do this together. And so the first thing that I guess I'd say to you this morning is just thank you. And here's what I mean. Thank you for showing up. You showed up. You're here. Sometimes I get up here in the first service and in this service, and I walk up here and I turn around and I look out, and I almost want to go, oh, you came back. You know, oh my gosh, you came back, you know, and you did. You came back and you keep coming back. And so you consequently, you keep showing up. So again, wherever you find yourself, age-wise or stage-wise, in the journey of life, I guess I'd just simply say this, just keep showing up. And here's why. This is what it means when you begin to have influence. Don't forget this idea. Your best chance to have influence in someone's life is to actually what? That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. You got to start here. If you want significant influence in somebody's life, show up. And the first place you need to start showing up is in your own home, right? Like you just got to start there. You go, well, I don't have kids in my home. Start with your grandkids. Start with the neighbor kids. Start with the kids in the youth group. Start with the kids in the nursery. Start with the kids wherever you serve, wherever you're around another generation of people. Just show up. Just show up. Those are the kids that you need to have the greatest connection with. Here's part of the struggle when it comes to this idea of influence is simply this. It's never really immediate. Right? Like you don't get an instant sense of gratification from that. Like there's no toddler that goes, thank you so much for disciplining me. No toddler says thank you for wiping his snotty nose. No preschooler goes, I'm so glad you reminded me that I need to put pants on before I go outside. You know? Nope. Middle school students? Not much different, right? Outside the fact that they will probably mumble thank you once you spend, exorbitant amounts of money on shoes and clothes and things like that. What they won't do necessarily is they're not going to take you out to dinner. They won't stop by Starbucks and buy you a cup of coffee and tell you all the wonderful ways that you have made their life better, right? Or their future is brighter because of your contribution into their world. And so consequently, all that to simply say this, sometimes when you don't see results, you just got to keep showing up. You just got to keep being there. You got to keep doing the thing, even though you don't see immediate results. I stop and I think about the people in my own life who invested in me when I was a teenager. Those teachers, leaders, youth volunteers, youth directors, all that kind of stuff. If they knew then that I would become a minister, they would have fainted, right? Like, if you'd have gone to them and said, Jeff Coleman's going to be a preacher of the gospel, they would have been like, not a chance, So if you're watching, thank you, because you kept showing up, and they did, they showed up. So I just want to say, keep showing up. Keep showing up for those people that are in your life, even though you don't see the result, even though you don't see it. And the best way you do this is your influence has got to be personal. And the person who best exemplifies this, obviously, is Christ. Jesus demonstrates this beautifully. It's in John chapter 1, beginning in verse 14. This is the message. I love the rendering of this. It says, the Word, talking about Christ, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. This is a paraphrase, and in the original language of the New Testament, there's a word here, and it says, and He dwelt among us, or He dwelt with us. And that word dwelt is the word iskene. And when the Old Testament was translated into Greek, to describe the activity that God came down and lived among His people in the book of Exodus, they used the exact same Greek word. So it's this Greek word in the Old Testament, and when it was put into Old Testament or put into Greek, and it's the same word in the New Testament. What that means for you, and it means for me, is simply this. The God in the Old Testament came and dwelt among his people. He tabernacled among his people. He literally, the word means he pitched his tent among his people. He's the same God who comes and pitches his tent, dwells with, lives with, moves into the neighborhood in the New Testament. In other words, God comes and gets incredibly personal. You are called to go and become incredibly personal with the people in your world and in your sphere, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing. And so Jesus is the model. Jesus comes along, he sees Zacchaeus hanging out in a tree and goes, hey, Zach, dinner at your place, coming over. Climb on down. Goes and then sees Peter, Andrew, James, and John fishing and goes, hey, fellas, come on. I'm going to teach you how to fish for people. Finds a woman at the well and goes, yeah, you don't have a husband. In fact, you've had 5. And the man you're with now is not your husband. Let's talk. And they do. And so he gets incredibly personal. This is what we do. This is how we're supposed to live our life. And so as a result, I would just simply say this. Jesus finds us at the different phases and stages and places in our spiritual journey, right? He just does. He finds you right where you are. And just like Laura said, there's nothing too dirty, there's nothing too broken, there's nothing too whatever that we will ever be able to send away the grace of God. God just finds us right where we are. Ken Blanchard, who's a leading leadership expert, says these words: the key to successful leadership is influence and not authority. And it's just true. And we all kind of know this. I mean, but I think sometimes we have backward ideas around when it comes to this notion of influence, because sometimes what we really think is this. We think, well, I have power, I have influence, right? Like as a parent, you kind of do this, don't you, with your kids? Because you say, because what? Because I said so. So you said it before, exactly, right? Yeah, because you just didn't want to argue with them, and you just said, because I said so. That's it right there. That's kind of power. And that works when your kids are 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is. Not so much when they're 13, I mean, they might still do it, but they'll do it begrudgingly. Or then we think, well, if I'll have influence when I have success. Like you can go and you can build a healthy portfolio and you can run a company and you can be the president of the business, or you're traveling, you're consulting, you're doing the thing, you're smart and you're successful and all this kind of stuff, and people can look up to you, all except your 16-year-old daughter, right? And have you ever just wanted to look at your kids and because you've been successful at work, you've kind of wanted to say to your kids, you wanted to go, you should listen to me. People think I'm smart, right? And try it sometime and watch them go, oh, and roll their eyes and walk away, and engage in teen angst and that kind of thing. But listen, and the reason why they do that is because you haven't shown up, right? Like we're not showing up in their world and on their terms and in their space. And so sometimes we think this about influence. We go, well, if I have a title, I'll have influence. No. Just no. There's a great scene, and I wish I probably should have gotten it, but there's a great scene in the movie Braveheart where Mel Gibson's character, William Wallace, is a Scottish freedom fighter fighting for the independence of his people, is talking with Robert De Bruce, and Robert is just this man who is just not brave. He wants to be. He wants to be a hero. He wants to step up and kind of be the man, but he's not. And so they're talking, Wallace and Robert, and basically Wallace looks at him and says, people don't follow titles. They follow courage. People follow courage. They don't follow titles. I don't care how many titles you have. It doesn't matter. People always follow courage. And so be courageous. Don't worry about whatever title you have, because that's not going to work. And the best kind of influence that you need to have is obvious. It really, really is, right? I mean, here it is. It's trust. So you can have power, or you can have authority, or you can have trust. And we all know that that's how Jesus builds his influence. Influence needs to be earned. Trust needs to be built. What? This takes time. And that's what Jesus did. It just takes time. It takes time to earn it. It takes time to build it. It takes time to walk in it. It takes time to live it out. And that's what you do. You just have to keep showing up. You have to keep doing the thing over and over and over and over again, even if you don't see any results. There's a guy in the Bible who keeps showing up time and time and again in this situation, and his name is Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is the guy in the Old Testament who is called upon by God to rebuild the wall around the city of Jerusalem. The wall is crumbled and it's fallen. And walls back then in the Old Testament times, they symbolize strength and they symbolize security and they symbolize safety. And that's what it was. And so the walls are destroyed. Nehemiah hears about this, begins to pray, fasts for months on end, finally begins to articulate the vision of rebuilding the city walls. And you got to remember, Nehemiah's never met these people. He's not met these people. He's lived far away. He doesn't know who they are, doesn't know any of the families, any of that kind of stuff. But he gets this burden on his heart for people that he doesn't even know. And he goes back to Jerusalem and engages in the process of casting vision. And now the wall's started, and now they're rebuilding the wall. So here they go. They're rebuilding the wall. And then there's this moment in the book of Nehemiah in chapter 4 when the whole thing appears as though it's about to unravel. Like people are complaining and they're griping and there's complaints and there's rumors and there's all of these things that are going on in this moment. And suddenly what Nehemiah does is simply genius. Watch this. So I took up a position in the lowest part of the space behind the wall in an open area. Then I stationed the people by families, and they had their swords, spears, and bows. After reviewing this, I stood up and said to the officials, the officers, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember that the Lord is great and awesome. Fight for your what? Families. Say it with me. Your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. In one movement that is absolute brilliance, Nehemiah rallies families and parents to a whole new level of responsibility. He just does. Because everybody knows. Now, here's what I need you to do. I need you to grab the emotion in the moment, okay? You've heard me use this illustration before. Like, nobody looks at one another and goes, everything's going to be fine. We're just doing Nehemiah chapter 4. Okay? Because they don't know there's going to be Nehemiah chapter 5. Because they think they could die. Because the enemy's on the edge and the enemy's planning on attacking. So catch the emotion in all of the uncertainty in this moment. And what he does is he rallies all the people, and pretty soon the enemy thinks, oh no, something's going on. And so he organizes them by families, puts them inside the gaps of the wall, and basically says this: remember what you're fighting for. Remember what you're fighting for. And in one move, he recasts vision for this project, and suddenly it's not about building a wall anymore. It's not about building some dumb wall or a building project or anything like that. Why? Because now it's incredibly personal. It's incredibly personal because now my family's on the line. This suddenly becomes about sons and daughters and wives and husbands and grandparents and uncles and aunts and families and legacy and homes and all of this kind of stuff. It's now incredibly personal to each and every one of them. And you know what happened? Verse 15 describes what happens. Here's what happens. Then our enemies heard that we knew about their plans. They knew that God ruined their plans, so we all went back to work on the wall. Everyone went back to their own place and what? Did their part. Now, here's what that means for this church. Let me just apply this to our church. Every family, it is our desire that every family will be equipped and encouraged to fulfill its God-given role. Because you have one. Every one of you. You have a God-given role in the church of the living God. You just do. You do. You have a God-given role to speak into the life of another generation, to speak into the lives of one another. You just do. You go, well, I don't know everybody. You don't have to know everybody. That's not the point. That isn't the point. The point is that you would just simply assume your part and play the role that God has assigned you in this moment, right? And so maybe what you really need to do is to look out and see that the enemy really is trying to destroy the family. And what you probably need to do, and the enemy is even trying to destroy the church and marriages, again, and families and kids and so forth. And maybe what we really need to do is just kind of get good and angry, you know? Like, I don't think the church is angry enough sometimes over the right things. We're angry over dumb stuff. Okay, seriously, like we get angry over politics. Stop. Just put it aside. Put it aside. Focus on Jesus. Remember? Yellow, light. Focus on what? The bread of the presence. Focus on the bread. Keep the focus on Christ. Everything else will fall by the wayside. And get good and angry over what the enemy is doing in the world. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen, I wrote about this in the update, and so some of you already know where I'm going. Have you ever seen a mama get really good and angry over what happened to her kids? Right? Like, have you ever, remember the very first time that your kid came home from school and told you that somebody had been picking on them at school? Oh, you're a grown adult. You wanted to go beat some kid up, didn't you? I mean, you did. You did. You're like, he did what? What did she say to you? I mean, what you want to do is you want to go, you just stump that right now. Don't do that. That's bad. They'll call somebody on you. But you wanted to. You thought about it. Okay? Because listen, she might be kind and she might be sweet and she might be nice and whatever. But let me tell you something. You make a mama mad, watch what happens. Look at this. I may seem quiet and reserved, but if you mess with my children, I'll break out a little crazy and make your nightmare seem like a happy place. Right? Seriously, I mean, she will go like 7 levels of crazy on you. Maybe the enemy just knew that moms and dads fight differently when they look into the eyes of their kids and they realize what they're fighting for. Yeah? Like you should. And it shouldn't be, listen to me, church, it shouldn't be just your children. You should look into the eyes of every kid in this place and you should realize, I'm fighting for you. And I'm fighting for you, 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 and I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to fight for you. And that's what happens, right? I mean, this is what happens. And so as a result, when parents show up and they fight with a different level of passion, you know what happens? The wall gets rebuilt. The wall gets rebuilt, and that's what it is. And so we're talking about this idea of influence this morning, right? Like, how do you have influence and how do you keep showing up and keep doing the thing? And sometimes what you need to remember is you need to remember where are kids in their life? Where are they as they're thinking, as they're walking through these years in their life? And sometimes we forget. We just really do. And sometimes kids, and let's just be honest, sometimes we just kind of go, we almost treat them like they're in the way or whatever. No, don't do that. Just remember where they are. Like, how many of you remember your twos? Exactly, nobody. Thank you. Right, like if you raised your hand, I'd be like, no, you don't. Because we don't remember what it was like to be 2. And so consequently, we don't remember what those preschool years were like. And so consequently, did you know that a child has to take 75 steps more a minute to keep up with an adult when they're walking? Daddy, slow down. Slow down when you're walking through the store. Don't be in such a hurry. Mom, when you're there and you're shopping, I know you got to get the shopping done. I know. But just slow down. Slow down. The reason they put their arms up and they want you to pick them up is not because they're lazy. It's because they're working 75 times harder than you. Right? How many of you remember elementary school? Remember elementary school? Yeah, some of us do. We do. Yeah, we got memories from elementary school. Elementary's fun and that kind of thing. But what we forget is that the comparison crisis kind of hits around 2nd grade. And so around that period of time, that's when research indicates that it's really good to separate kids according to sexes because girls work well with girls and boys work well with boys. And so don't fight against it. Just play to that strength. Because here's why. In a few short years, you're going to have to separate them for another reason. It's not that their interests are too divergent. They're too common. They're too interested, right? How many people remember middle school? How many people wish you could forget middle school? Junior high, whatever we used to call that thing. Yeah, absolutely. Did you know that an average middle schooler loses 1/3 of their cerebral cortex? Totally true. Totally true. It's a process that begins in early adolescence, and sometimes it's not complete until early adulthood, like in their early 20s or somewhere in that time frame. They're losing 1/3 of their cerebral cortex. It's a process called synaptic pruning. They're losing their mind. And so consequently, if you as a parent of a middle schooler have ever looked at a middle school student and said, did you not know? Well, yeah, at one point they did, but they don't know anymore because they've lost their mind. You know? And so we just need to remember this. So instead of doing this, Mom, instead of going, how many times do I need to tell you? Don't do that. Just pause, take a deep breath, smile and say, how can I help you? That's what you have to say, right? Remember your high school years? Sure you do. Yeah, you remember your high school years. We remember high school. Here's the thing, is most of us remember high school when we were in high school. Because we don't know what it's like, honestly, for teenagers to be in high school today. It is an unprecedented time for teenagers. In fact, the truth of the matter is, they may be one of the loneliest generations on the planet with all the things that they're up against and all the things that they're facing. And so when we think about teenagers and we think about kids and we think about high schoolers and middle schoolers and all this kind of stuff, the best thing that we can realize is we've never been through what they're going through. Think about how much things have changed since you got out of high school, right? It's a different world out there, guys. And I know somebody's going to, yeah, but when I was 16, stop. Your 16's not their 16. I promise. It's a totally different world. It's just an absolutely different world. Why do I share this with you? I share this with you for one reason. And I want you to be a godly influence. I want you to continue to be able to show up, even though you don't see any results. I need the yellow of the church and the light of the world and the love and the heart of the family to come together to form Orange so that we can impact a younger generation, so that we can leverage resources. You need to get on the Parent Cue app. I have my grandkids in the Parent Cue app. Okay, and just put your own kids in there, or your grandkids, or whoever it is, whoever the kids are in your life. And so, listen, if you're thinking and you're looking at me and you're kind of going, I don't know, Jeff, I'm not sure, I'm not really sure I'm into all this, and I don't know if I want to do this. Here's what I want to say to you. I want to say, you have to. Because it's your responsibility, because you took a membership vow. It doesn't matter if you have kids or you're a single or wherever you are in life spectrum. If you've been a part of this church for any length of time, or you're thinking about allowing this place to be your faith family, guess what? It's your responsibility. This is what we do. And you've heard people like Catherine say, well, it's just a phase, right? Like parents are talking and they're going, does your kid do this? And they go, honey, it's just a phase. It's going to be fine. They're going to be all right. Meaning that they'll eventually grow out of it. And like Catherine said, we just want to change the language around that idea, because it's not just a phase. It's a phase, but we don't want you to miss it, because every phase is different and every phase is amazing. And just so that we all know what a phase is, let's just kind of give some language around this. Here it is. A phase is a time frame in a kid's life when you can leverage distinctive opportunities to influence a kid's future. That's what it is. That's what a phase is. And so you've got these moments. Every one of us have these opportunities, because again, Catherine and I, we didn't share our notes in terms of the announcement script in my sermon, but it walks perfectly together. So it just tells me that it's the Lord. Because what you know is what she told you, and what I'm about to tell you as well. Your time's running out. It is. You don't have as many weeks as you think you do. You just don't. And so there's going to come a day, and it's not far away, when on a Friday night, remember we talked about this last week, when the freshman in college is sitting on a dorm room bed, and a knock on that door comes. And the question will become, have we as a church done everything within our power in the short 18 years that we get with kids to enable that student, eventually a generation of people, to make the wisest, godliest decision? Are we doing everything necessary to fight for your family so that you can fight for somebody else's family? You don't even know that kid on the other side of the room over there, but you're fighting for that kid. And you don't even know that family that's sitting back over there, but you're fighting for that family. Because this is what happens when the body of Christ can come together and we all begin working in the same direction, all pulling to the same end, so that we can leverage time, we can leverage resources. Because in the end, here's what you need to do, church. Here's what you need to do. Remember what you're fighting for. It's about sons and daughters. It's about aunts and uncles and grandparents. And it's about families. It's about your home. It's about husbands and wives. It's about legacy. It's about helping a kid make a wise and godly decision. It's just a phase. So don't miss it.